traveller, imagine this at dawn, a single human footprint pressed into ancient ash, untouched for tens of thousands of years, waiting quietly beneath the dust of time. Above it the sky turns pale gold and the world feels impossibly young, as if history has just taken its first breath. You are here now, not by accident, but because something older than memory is stirring. Science tells us that humans like you and me have existed for more than 300,000 years. Yet everything we call civilization occupies only the last fragile 10,000. So what are the odds that an entire species could think, dream and wonder for 90,000 years without building cities or writing its name into stone? What if that long silence was not emptiness but preparation, an unseen pattern slowly assembling itself in the dark picture knowledge, moving like a faint constellation passed from voice to voice, never recorded, never lost? Stay with me, let's drift a little deeper. Traveller, picture this, a thin ribbon of fire trembling at the edge of a long, prehistoric night, its glow barely holding back the dark. The ground beneath it is cold, layered with ash and dust that once remembered footsteps now erased. Above the sky stretches vast and indifferent stars, burning in patient silence, the same stars that watched our ancestors breathe into the darkness for hundreds of thousands of years. You are here now listening, and that is not an accident. The universe has always guided attention gently like gravity guiding dust into form toward moments where the past exhales and the present leans close enough to hear. For most of human existence, there were no cities waiting to rise, no monuments dreaming of permanence, no names carved to defy time. There was only movement, breath, hunger, memory carried in bodies instead of books. Science tells us something unsettling and strangely beautiful. Humans like you, with the same hands, the same neural architecture, the same capacity for wonder and fear, have walked this planet for more than 300,000 years. And yet almost everything we call civilization occupies only the final fragile sliver of that immense timeline. 90,000 years stretch behind us like a dark ocean, deep and resistant to explanation, absorbing questions without returning answers. I've spent long nights with quiet instruments humming beside me, maps spread across tables, dust clinging to their edges, like sediment on an exposed core sample. In those hours I learned that silence is not empty. Gravity remembers every step even when stone forgets. Erosion is time thinking slowly, grain by grain. Radiation is a whisper from vanished events, proof that the universe speaks long after witnesses are gone. For tens of thousands of years our ancestors left almost nothing behind that we would recognize as progress. No towers, no scripts, no fields bound to seasons. And still they survived. The probability alone is astonishing. What if that long age was not absence but incubation? What if intelligence does not always announce itself with architecture and writing, but sometimes hides in rhythm, migration, and stories told close to firelight? Imagine knowledge moving the way faint starlight does, crossing generations instead of space arriving late yet intact. Tools change slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if humanity itself was cautious, conserving energy, waiting. In physics, systems do not transform until thresholds are crossed. Pressure builds invisibly, temperature shifts quietly. Then, without warning, a phase change occurs. The world of that forgotten age was unstable beyond anything modern life prepares us for. Ice advanced and retreated like a restless thought. Coastlines drowned beneath rising seas, erasing camps that had endured for generations. Deserts bloomed into grasslands, then collapsed again into dust. A single volcanic winter could dim the sun for decades, cooling oceans, starving forests, reshaping migration routes written into muscle memory. In such a universe, permanence was dangerous. To build too much was to risk losing everything. Perhaps that is why our ancestors trusted movement more than stone memory, more than walls adaptation, more than ambition. Light itself was unreliable. Nights could stretch colder than expected, days shorter than remembered. Yet adaptation remained constant. Humans learned to read landscapes like shifting equations to sense when to stay and when to vanish. They lived lightly not because they were incapable of more, but because the earth itself demanded restraint. The absence of cities was not ignorance, it was strategy. Survival in chaos requires flexibility, not monuments. Sometimes during the quietest hours before dawn, I imagine one of them looking up, seeing the same constellations you see now. They did not know they were early chapters in a story that would one day include satellites and telescopes, equations and probes touching other worlds. They did not know their patience would become our inheritance. They were not building towards civilization. They were listening to the planet, responding to its moods, learning its cycles through repetition and loss. Civilization would arrive later, like an echo delayed by vast distance shaped by everything that came before it. There is a temptation in modern minds to measure worth by acceleration, to assume that progress must always look like growth. But the long prelude of humanity suggests something else. For 90,000 years, stability was not found in expansion, but in balance. Not in conquest, but in attunement. Each generation refined tiny adjustments, passing them forward like fragile signals, trusting that someone in the future would need them. That future is now. You're not lost in Space Traveler. You are part of it. The calm you feel when you stop demanding answers is the same calm that kept our species alive through ice ages and ash-filled skies. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only observed. Tonight the universe whispers again, reminding us that understanding is not always required for meaning. In the end, traveller, it's all right to not understand. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Silence is the universe thinking. Sleep gently and let the ancient night hold you. Observer, imagine a stone warmed by countless hands pass slowly across generations until its surface remembers every touch. It rests beneath layers of soil, silent, patient, precise, carrying information the way gravity carries mass. This is how evidence survives the long night of prehistory, not as monuments, but as faint signals embedded within matter itself. Archaeology never shouts or demands attention. It waits, listens, measures, and compares. When listening becomes careful enough, the earth responds softly, revealing patterns hidden beneath dust, erosion, and time. These traces endure where stories fade, holding truth without voices or names for future listeners alone. Across Africa, the earliest homeland of our species' scattered sites whisper continuity rather than revolution. Stone tools shift slowly across millennia edges, refined by patience instead of urgency. Fire appears not as spectacle but routine, a technology so familiar it vanishes into habit. Ash layers stack like chapters written without titles. To hurried eyes, nothing changes. To minds trained in deep time, everything moves deliberately. Survival selects consistency. Anything unreliable disappears. Anything functional persists. Progress here is measured in endurance, not acceleration, and evidence records that discipline faithfully over vast spans of forgotten planetary history beneath shifting climates and skies. I remember standing at a dig site at dusk, dust settling on instruments, realizing evidence ignores expectation. We search for dramatic leaps, moments circled in textbooks. The past offers gradients instead. Change diffuses like heat through stone. Over 90,000 years, humans optimized survival within narrow margins. Each behavior faced hunger. Cold predators collapse. Anything unnecessary vanished. Anything dependable endured. This restraint reveals intelligence tuned to instability, a species learning when not to advance, when stillness meant safety under skies, constantly rewriting the rules of living and memory through silence and repetition across generations, yet unnamed by history itself alone. Bone needles emerged, suggesting tailored clothing long before ice demanded protection. Shell beads travel hundreds of miles inland, proof of networks stretched across danger. Ochre pigments recur ground carefully carried, deliberately used for reasons science describes but cannot finish. These objects are signals. They show symbolic thought blooming quietly, binding meaning to matter without writing or cities. Culture existed mobile and fragile, surviving because it remained light, portable, adaptable to collapse. Evidence implies minds already complex, patient, and deeply aware of environmental volatility long before monuments hardened thought into stone permanence that later generations would misunderstand as primitive simplicity alone. What fascinates me is restraint visible within the record. Knowledge accumulates, yet expansion waits. Humans could settle earlier claimland, build heavier lives. Instead, they moved with seasons, trusting memory over walls. In unstable climates, investment becomes risk. Adaptability becomes insurance. Civilization would have been premature wait. Data aligns with this caution. Migration mirrors climate cycles. Tool distribution follows ecosystems. Humanity behaved like a system near equilibrium, waiting for stability before transformation. Physics names this patience equilibrium, biology names it survival wisdom, earned through repeated loss and environmental negotiation, rather than sudden creative dominance over landscapes always shifting beneath stars. Evidence also reveals absence, and absence matters deeply. No endless war layers, no cities burned and rebuilt repeatedly. Violence existed, but cooperation dominated survival. Shared roots, shared techniques, shared stories encoded materially. Even vanished languages left fingerprints through genes and trade. Small bands remained connected, a planetary web woven slowly. Isolation meant extinction. Connection meant continuity. These networks were invisible architectures supporting humanity long before stone structures appeared. They transmitted knowledge mates, warnings, hope and resilience across dangerous distances, maintaining genetic health and cultural memory through movement without centralized power or hierarchy, only trust and ritual exchange binding them quietly. Sometimes I imagine evidence as planetary memory, not narrative but structural. Sediment remembers floods, ice remembers air, stone remembers impact. Human presence registers through persistence rather than proclamation. 90,000 years of persistence leaves a measurable signature. It bends probabilities. It explains survival through catastrophes. It reveals intelligence expressed as patience. Yet evidence stops short of belief. Tools cannot translate dreams. Beads cannot recite myths. Data frames questions, not answers. Here science pauses, meeting mystery without retreat or fear. Understanding yields to observation, humility replacing certainty. This boundary is not failure. It is respectful restraint toward ancient unknowns that endure. What did they fear during endless nights? What did stars mean when fire dimmed? Evidence remains quiet. Ochre hints at ritual. Burial patterns suggest care beyond utility. These gestures imply inner world science acknowledges cautiously. Consciousness expanded inward before building outward. Meaning preceded architecture. Perhaps belief was lighter than stone, easier to carry when migration was survival. In this, humanity learned to travel with ideas rather than walls. The mind became a shelter flexible enough for catastrophe. This adaptability preserved culture through collapse and renewal cycles, long before stable climates allowed permanence or cities demanded memory beyond human bodies alone. There are nights when I arrange data beneath lamplight and feel calm acceptance. Patterns emerge without explanation. Humanity waited because waiting worked. Survival rewarded restraint. This was not stagnation, but tuning. Like an orbit stabilizing, like a waveform settling. The species aligned itself with planetary rhythms. Evidence reflects harmony rather than conquest. Only when climate calmed would heavier systems emerge. The archaeological record holds its breath at this threshold. Transformation requires conditions, not desire, not intelligence alone. This truth humbles modern assumptions of progress. Evidence teaches patience across deep time and respect for planetary tempo set beyond human control always. In the end observer, it is all right to not understand. Evidence invites contemplation, not closure. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again. The earth remembers with us, storing stories without words. Sleep gently knowing knowledge once moved slowly, carefully protecting life through silence, patience and trust. The record remains calm and open, waiting for listeners willing to rest inside uncertainty. This long prelude shaped everything that followed. Civilization stands upon restraint as much as invention. Remember that as darkness arrives. Sleep observer, the cosmos keeps watch. Somewhere ancient still moves quietly beyond certainty and fear forever. Observer. Imagine a moment when the instruments fall silent not because they have failed, but because what they record no longer fits expectation. A deviation appears subtle at first, like a tremor beneath calm water. In science, anomalies are not errors to be erased. They are invitations. They are the places where understanding slows, where certainty loosens its grip, where the universe hints that something older is moving beneath familiar patterns. For tens of thousands of years, human behavior followed a rhythm so stable, it almost disappeared into the background of time. Tools improved slowly. Migration routes repeated. Social structures remained light and flexible. Then scattered across the archaeological record, faint disturbances emerge, not everywhere, not all at once. Small local shifts that resist simple explanation. An unexpected symbol carved into ochre, a tool too refined for its age, a settlement occupied longer than climate models would predict. These are not revolutions, they are ripples. I remember the first time I noticed one of these irregularities: late at night data glowing softly on a screen while rain tapped against the window. The numbers were correct, the dates calibrated, and yet the pattern bent. Something had changed briefly, then faded again. An anomaly is not proof of lost civilizations or forgotten empires. It is more delicate than that. It is evidence of experimentation of minds testing boundaries without committing to permanence. Human history before civilization is not a straight line. It is a field of probabilities. Most behaviors cluster tightly around survival norms, but occasionally someone steps outside that cluster. Someone makes an object that serves no obvious function. Someone invests time where time is scarce. Someone imagines something not immediately useful. These moments leave thin traces like particles passing through a detector, visible only because they disturb the expected flow. Consider symbolic behavior. Ochre engravings appear, then vanish, then reappear elsewhere thousands of years later. Not a steady march, but a flicker. Art is born, retreats, and returns. Burial practices show care beyond utility, then disappear again under harsher conditions. This suggests not ignorance but choice constrained by environment. When resources tighten, symbolism becomes dangerous luxury. When conditions soften, imagination breathes again. The anomaly is not that humans could think symbolically early. It is that they sometimes chose not to. Climate plays a quiet role here. Ice ages are not static walls of cold. They pulse. Warm intervals open brief windows of abundance. During these windows, anomalies bloom. Longer stays in one place, denser social gatherings, more elaborate objects. Then the window closes, ice advances, sea levels fall, routes shift, the experiment ends. What remains is a faint echo preserved by chance. I have traced these echoes across continents, aligning anomalies with paleoclimate data, watching how human behavior responds like a sensitive instrument to planetary change. The correlation is unsettling. It suggests that civilization was not delayed by lack of intelligence, but restrained by instability. Each anomaly was a rehearsal cut short by conditions unfit for permanence. Civilization tried to begin many times quietly and was gently or violently reset. This idea unsettles modern narratives of progress. We prefer inevitability, we prefer clean origins, but the data resists simplicity. Instead, it reveals a species repeatedly approaching thresholds, touching them, then stepping back. Like matter, heated to the edge of transformation, then cooled again. Phase change postponed. There is comfort in this restraint. It means failure was not final. Each anomaly left knowledge behind, diffused into populations carried forward unconsciously. A tool shape remembered, a social ritual adapted, a way of seeing the world stored not in stone but in neural pathways. Even when experiments collapsed, their residue remained. Sometimes when I walk alone at night, I think of these forgotten innovators, individuals who imagined more than their world could support. Their ideas did not vanish. They dissolved, becoming part of the background noise of humanity, waiting for conditions to amplify them. The universe works this way. Energy is never lost. It changes form. Knowledge behaves the same. Anomalies also warn us. They show how fragile progress is, how easily complexity collapses when systems destabilize. A single drought can erase centuries of adaptation. A volcanic winter can compress populations to the edge of extinction. Humans survived by letting complexity ebb and flow, refusing to anchor too heavily to any one structure. This flexibility is written into our species at a deep level, and yet something in us keeps reaching for more. Even in the harshest times, anomalies persist. A decorated tool, a distant trade good, a ritual gesture repeated without clear survival value. These are signals of a mind unwilling to remain purely reactive. A mind searching for meaning even when meaning offers no calories, no shelter, no safety. Science can map these anomalies, but it cannot inhabit them. We measure residue, not intention. We see outcomes, not the inner calculations of ancient minds. Here, uncertainty becomes companion rather than obstacle. It reminds us that humanity is not defined solely by what endured, but also by what almost was. In quiet moments, I accept that some anomalies were lost forever. Coastal experiments now drowned beneath hundreds of feet of water, settlements erased by advancing ice. Knowledge burned in ash. The record we have is biased toward survival, not ambition. What we see are the ideas that fit through catastrophe. Others remain ghosts. Still, anomalies matter. They tell us that for 90,000 years humanity was not static. It was testing, probing, imagining, then retreating when the cost grew too high. Civilization did not erupt suddenly. It accumulated pressure through countless failed beginnings. When stability finally arrived, the release felt abrupt only because the preparation was invisible. In the end, observer, it's all right to not understand. Anomalies are not puzzles demanding solutions. They are reminders of fragility, patience, and restraint. Some mysteries wait. Others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again, tracing faint deviations through deep time, inviting us to rest inside uncertainty. Sleep gently, observer. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, remembering every near beginning, every reset, every quiet attempt to become more. Listener, imagine a landscape after sound has withdrawn from it, not abruptly but gradually like breath, leaving a body at rest. The fires burned low, the wind has stilled, even the insects seem to hesitate. Silence settles not as emptiness but as presence. In the deep past, silence was not the absence of life. It was the condition that allowed life to continue unnoticed. This is the silence that stretches across tens of thousands of years, the long interval where humanity exists without announcing itself to the future. Archaeological silence is often misunderstood. We speak of gaps of missing evidence of dark ages before light. But silence is not a void. It is a filter. Only certain actions pass through it. Stone survives. Bone sometimes does. Wood almost never. Voice never does. Entire ways of living dissolve without trace, not because they were insignificant, but because they were light enough to vanish when the conditions changed. The silence of prehistory is not failure to record. It is success at remaining flexible. For 90,000 years, most human lives ended without leaving marks that could endure beyond a few seasons. Camps were abandoned deliberately, shelters dismantled, tools recycled or carried forward. This was not ignorance of legacy. It was wisdom shaped by instability. To leave nothing permanent was to avoid being tied to a place that might soon betray you. Silence became strategy. I think often of nights spent alone with datasets that thin suddenly where distributions fade and timelines blur. There is a temptation to fill these silences with speculation, to invent stories where evidence retreats. But silence deserves respect. In physics, silence can indicate equilibrium. In astronomy, it can mean a signal too faint, too distant, or too brief. In human history, silence often marks periods when survival demanded discretion. The planet itself enforced this quiet. Ice ages pressed populations into refuges. Deserts expanded, severing routes. Sea levels fell, exposing plains, then rose again, drowning them. Each cycle erased evidence faster than humans could produce it. Even memory became precarious. Stories shortened, traditions simplified. Complexity retreated inward, stored in minds rather than material culture. Silence grew not because humans stopped thinking, but because thinking left fewer traces. Silence also shaped behavior. Without writing, without monuments, knowledge moved through repetition and ritual. What could not be remembered reliably was allowed to fade. Only what mattered most survived transmission. This created a form of cultural compression. Information density increased. Songs became maps, myths encoded seasons, gestures carried instruction. Silence was not empty space, it was bandwidth limitation. There is something profoundly modern about our discomfort with this. We equate silence with loss. We fear gaps. We assume that if something left no trace, it lacked value. But the deep past suggests the opposite. Value was measured by resilience, not record. The quietest practices were often the most enduring. In long stretches of silence, humanity refined its relationship with uncertainty. There were no guarantees that children would survive, that seasons would repeat, that prey would return. Planning beyond a few cycles was dangerous. The future was not something to be built. It was something to be endured. Silence teaches patience. It teaches acceptance of limits. Sometimes late at night, when the world grows still, I try to imagine living without the expectation of permanence. No archives, no saved work, no assurance that effort would accumulate. Every generation beginning almost fresh, carrying only what could be remembered and adapted. It would demand humility. It would demand trust in processes rather than outcomes. Perhaps this is why the archaeological record feels quiet. It reflects a mindset that did not expect to be overheard by the future. Silence also protected humanity from itself. Ambition unchecked by environment leads to collapse. Without the ability to store massive surplus, without dense populations, without rigid hierarchies, runaway complexity remained constrained. When systems grew too heavy, silence returned them to balance. Collapse left fewer scars because structures were light. The reset was gentle compared to later civilizations. This is not romanticism. Life was hard. Silence did not mean peace. It meant vulnerability. Predators, disease, accidents, hunger. But silence also meant that no single failure could cascade across millions. Loss was local, recovery possible. The species survived by distributing risk across time and space, leaving no central point of failure. Silence was decentralization. Modern science struggles with this because our tools are designed to detect accumulation. We see cities, we see monuments, we see writing. We are less adept at seeing restraint, at seeing systems optimized to leave nothing behind. Silence forces us to confront a different definition of success. As I sit with this realization surrounded by quiet instruments and dim screens, I feel an unexpected calm. Silence does not accuse us of ignorance. It invites us to listen differently, to accept that some of the most important chapters of human history were never meant to be read, only lived. The long silence before civilization was not waiting for something better. It was something complete in itself, a mode of existence tuned to a restless planet. When stability finally arrived, silence would give way to sound, to record, to permanence. But that later noise stands on this foundation of quiet. In the end, listener, it's all right to not understand. Silence is not a problem to solve. It is the universe thinking. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the quiet stretches back through deep time, wrapping gently around us. Sleep now, listener. Let the silence hold you. The cosmos remains awake, remembering everything that did not need to be said. Traveller, imagine a span of time so long that it loses its edges, a corridor without doors where days repeat until centuries blur into a single season. This is the forgotten epoch, the age that lives between events, between catastrophes, between beginnings that never fully arrive. It is not marked by monuments or names, but by endurance. In this epoch, humanity exists quietly, adapting without announcement, refining itself in ways that leave little trace except survival. The forgotten epoch is not empty history. It is history compressed beyond recognition. Generations rise and fall without ceremony. Children learn the same lessons their grandparents learned, not because nothing changes, but because change arrives slowly, cautiously, as if the world itself prefers repetition. Tools are familiar, paths are known, Stories circle the same stars. To modern minds, this looks like stagnation. To a species living inside constant environmental uncertainty, it is stability. I often think of this epoch when reviewing timelines that stretch unbroken for tens of thousands of years. The data points align so neatly that they almost disappear. Nothing dramatic interrupts the pattern. No sudden expansions. No collapses large enough to scar the planet. Just persistence. In physics, systems that endure long periods without dramatic change are often near optimal states. They are efficient, resilient, and difficult to disrupt. Humanity during this forgotten epoch may have reached such a state. Life was not easy, it was simply balanced. Every decision carried cost, every innovation risked failure. So most changes were incremental, tested carefully against reality. When a new technique worked, it spread slowly through networks of kin and exchange. When it failed, it vanished without record. This filtering created a cultural equilibrium where only the most reliable practices endured. The forgotten epoch was not about progress, it was about calibration. There is something unsettling about this when viewed from the present. We are conditioned to believe that meaning accumulates through visible achievement. Yet for most of human existence, meaning was private, local, ephemeral. It lived in relationships, in shared labour, in rituals that dissolved with the people who performed them. The forgotten epoch reminds us that significance does not require permanence. During this time, the planet itself was restless. Ice sheets advanced and retreated. Sea levels shifted coastlines by hundreds of miles. Forests turned to grasslands, then deserts, then forests again. Each transformation forced subtle adjustments in behaviour. Humanity responded not with conquest, but with movement. When conditions deteriorated, people left. When conditions improved, they returned. This mobility erased traces almost as quickly as they were made. I imagine a camp used seasonally for generations, never long enough to accumulate deep layers, always abandoned before permanence could form. Knowledge resided not in place, but in memory. The landscape was read like a text rewritten each year. Survival depended on remembering patterns rather than imposing them. The forgotten epoch trained humanity to observe rather than dominate. This age also shaped the human mind in ways we still carry. Patience, tolerance for uncertainty, the ability to delay gratification across generations. When outcomes are unpredictable, expectation softens. Hope becomes quiet rather than grand. This psychological adaptation may be as important as any technological one. A species that expects little is rarely disappointed. A species that adapts continuously is difficult to eliminate. Sometimes I wonder how much was lost in this forgetting. Entire worldviews dissolved without trace. Songs that encoded landscapes now submerged. Techniques perfected and then abandoned because the environment shifted again. The archaeological record captures only fragments, biased toward what survived catastrophe. The forgotten epoch likely held far more complexity than we can reconstruct. Our ignorance is not evidence of absence, and yet forgetting was not purely loss. It was also protection. Memory is weight. Too much of it anchors behaviour to conditions that may never return. By forgetting quickly, humanity remained flexible. Each generation carried forward only what still worked. This ruthless efficiency preserved the species through cycles that destroyed less adaptable forms of life. The forgotten epoch challenges our desire for narrative clarity. There is no single story arc, no hero's journey, no clear beginning or end, just continuity. This can feel unsatisfying, even uncomfortable, but perhaps that discomfort reveals something about us, not them. We live in a world that values accumulation. They lived in one that valued balance. When I sit quietly with this thought, I feel a strange gratitude. Civilization, with all its noise and weight, rests on an invisible foundation built during this forgotten epoch. The ability to cooperate without centralized authority. The skill of transmitting knowledge orally with high fidelity. The instinct to read environments and adapt behavior accordingly. These capacities were forged long before writing fixed thought in place. The forgotten epoch did not aim towards civilization. It aimed towards survival. Civilization emerged later as a byproduct, not a goal. When climate stabilized and populations grew, the old balance became unsustainable. New structures formed, memory externalized, silence broke. But the deep habits of restraint, patience, and adaptability remained embedded in us. In the end, traveller, it's all right to not understand this age fully. It resists summary. Some mysteries wait. Others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again, reminding us that forgetting can be as important as remembering. Sleep now, traveller. Let the forgotten epoch drift behind your thoughts. The cosmos will keep watch, holding every quiet life that passed unseen through deep time. Observer. Imagine the moment after impact, after eruption, after collapse, when the world has not yet decided what comes next. The air is heavy with ash. Light is muted, filtered through particles that remember violence. Sound travels strangely softened, delayed. This is the reset, not an ending, but a return to zero where complexity is stripped away, and only what can endure remains. In the deep history of humanity, resets were not rare interruptions. They were recurring conditions. The planet is not a stable host. It pulses. It convulses. Supervolcanoes rewrite skies. Ice ages advance like slow erasers. Oceans rise and swallow coasts that once fed entire cultures. To live on Earth is to live inside a system that periodically forgets itself. Every reset tests whether life has learned enough to continue. Humanity passed these tests not through strength but through flexibility. Evidence of reset appears everywhere once you learn how to look. Genetic bottlenecks, abrupt drops in population diversity, archaeological horizons where tools simplify settlements vanish and long-distance networks collapse. These are not mysteries of incompetence, they are signatures of survival mode. When catastrophe strikes, specialization becomes liability, complexity becomes weight. The species sheds what it cannot carry. I think often of the Toba eruption, though it was only one reset among many. A mountain exploding with the force of millions of nuclear bombs, ash circling the globe, temperatures falling for years. Some estimates suggest humanity was reduced to a few thousand breeding individuals. The margin between continuation and extinction narrowed to a breath. And yet something remarkable happened. Humans adapted. They condensed knowledge. They leaned into cooperation. They survived. Reset does not erase everything equally. It selects. What survives is not what is most advanced, but what is most transferable. Skills that can be taught quickly. Tools that can be made anywhere. Social rules that maintain cohesion under stress. After each reset, humanity emerged simpler but not empty. The core remained intact, ready to rebuild when conditions allowed. There is a misconception that progress is linear, that once something is learned, it is never lost. The deep past disagrees. Knowledge flickers. Techniques appear, vanish, then reappear thousands of years later. This is not failure. It is adaptation to repeated reset. When environments destabilize, the safest strategy is to forget what no longer applies. Memory itself becomes selective. During resets, time compresses, days blur, planning horizons shrink, the future becomes abstract, unreliable. Survival returns to the present moment. Food, shelter, warmth, trust. Under these conditions, humanity learned something profound. Identity does not reside in structures or achievements. It resides in relationships and shared responses to threat. This lesson would echo forward, shaping every society that followed, even when it believed itself immune to collapse. Sometimes late at night, I imagine standing among survivors after a reset. The silence would be immense. Not the silence of peace, but of recalibration. People would move cautiously, speaking little conserving energy. Innovation would pause. Observation would dominate. The world would be relearned piece by piece. This pause is written into our species. It is why we can stop, reassess, and begin again. Reset also reframes ambition. Grand plans dissolve under ash and ice. What remains is humility, a recognition that the planet sets the rules, that permanence is temporary, that survival depends on listening as much as acting. Each reset reinforced this awareness, engraving it deeper into human behavior. We became a species that expects disruption. This expectation is still with us. It appears as anxiety, as preparedness, as storytelling filled with floods and fires and endings. These are not just myths. They are memories diffused across generations, cultural echoes of resets endured long before writing preserved them. The apocalypse has always been part of the human imagination, because it has always been part of human experience. Reset is not cruelty, it is process. In astrophysics, stars reset when fuel runs out, collapsing and igniting new reactions. In ecology, forests reset through fire, allowing renewal. Humanity participates in these cycles not as exception but as expression. We are matter learning to reorganize itself under pressure. What matters is not avoiding reset but surviving it. Humanity succeeded by remaining small when necessary, by dispersing risk, by refusing to anchor identity to fragile systems. Civilization would later challenge this strategy, building density and permanence that amplify collapse. But during the long prelude, reset was anticipated, absorbed and endured. As I reflect on this, I feel neither dread nor comfort, but acceptance. Reset is not something that happened only in the past. It is an ongoing possibility. The skills that carried our ancestors through ash, darkened skies still reside in us. Cooperation, adaptability, patience, the willingness to let go. In the end, observer, it's all right to not understand every reset. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again, reminding us that survival is not about preserving everything, but about preserving enough. Sleep now, observer. Let the thought of reset drift gently through you. The cosmos will keep watch, and whatever comes next will begin quietly as it always has. Traveller, imagine a sound that never truly fades, only weakens as it travels stretching across distance, until it becomes indistinguishable from silence. This is an echo, not a repetition, but a persistence. In the deep history of humanity, echoes are what remain after resets, after forgetting, after survival strips life down to essentials. They are patterns carried forward unconsciously, behaviours repeated without knowing their origin, knowledge remembered without remembering why. Echo is how the past survives without monuments. After every reset, humanity did not start from nothing. Something always carried through, a way of shaping stone, a habit of sharing food, a gesture used to settle conflict. These were not inventions rediscovered. They were echoes transmitted quietly through imitation and practice. Children learned by watching, not by instruction manuals. What endured did so because it fit naturally into life under uncertainty. Echoes do not argue for their usefulness. They prove it by lasting. The archaeological record is filled with these repetitions, tool forms that disappear in one region and reappear thousands of years later in another, settlement patterns that converge independently under similar conditions, social behaviours that mirror one another across continents without contact. This is not coincidence, it is resonance. When humans face the same pressures, they rediscover the same solutions. The echo is not memory alone, it is convergence guided by constraint. I have often felt this while comparing distant sites late into the night, maps spread across the table dust still clinging to boots. A scraper from southern Africa shares proportions with one from the Levant. A hearth arrangement repeats across millennia. These similarities are too precise to dismiss, yet too dispersed to attribute to direct transmission. They arise from shared human cognition, interacting with the same planetary rules. Gravity teaches the same lesson everywhere. Hunger teaches the same priorities. Cold demands the same responses. The echo emerges naturally. Echo also exists within the human body. Genetic adaptations shaped by ancient climates persist. Long after those climates fade, metabolic traits, stress responses, social instincts tuned for small groups. We carry ancient solutions into modern contexts that no longer match their purpose. This is why some behaviours feel misaligned with contemporary life. The echo remains even when the environment has changed. But echoes are not static. They distort over distance. Each generation modifies what it inherits subtly unconsciously. A ritual becomes symbolic rather than practical. A technique becomes tradition rather than necessity. Over time, the original function blurs, but the behaviour remains. This is how myth grows from survival. This is how stories outlive their causes. In the long pre-civilized age, echoes allowed humanity to rebuild faster after each collapse. Even when material culture simplified behavioral patterns persisted, cooperation did not need to be reinvented. Trust did not need to be rediscovered. The structure of social life reassembled itself because its blueprint lived in shared habits. This resilience is difficult to measure but impossible to deny. I sometimes think of echo as gravity acting on culture. Once a pattern forms, it bends future behavior toward itself, not deterministically but probabilistically. The more often something works, the more likely it is to be repeated. Over tens of thousands of years, these probabilities accumulate, shaping the trajectory of the species without conscious design. Civilization would later crystallize some of these echoes into institutions, laws, formalized habits. Architecture fixed patterns of gathering. Writing froze memory in place. But long before that echo guided behavior invisibly. There is humility in recognizing this. It means no single generation invents itself. Each one is an expression of accumulated echoes modified by circumstance. The forgotten innovators, the unnamed survivors, the quiet teachers around ancient fires, they all speak through us without voices. Their solutions persist because they solved real problems under real constraints. Echo also explains why certain ideas feel intuitively right across cultures. Fairness, reciprocity, storytelling, music. These are not luxuries. They are echoes of systems that maintained cohesion when survival depended on trust. Even today, when stripped of context, these behaviors resonate. They feel human because they are deeply embedded responses to long-vanished conditions. As a scientist, I am trained to isolate variables, to seek origins, to assign causality. Echo resists this. It diffuses cause across time. It blurs authorship. It reminds me that not all influence is linear or traceable. Some things persist simply because they fit. There is a quiet comfort in this realization. It means that even in periods of apparent stagnation, humanity was not idle. It was reverberating, refining itself through repetition and slight variation. Progress was not visible, but it was cumulative. Each echo sharpened the species' ability to respond to uncertainty. In modern life, we often fear repetition. We crave novelty. But the deep past suggests repetition is how resilience forms. Echo is rehearsal. It prepares systems to respond automatically when crisis returns. This is why humanity survived cycles that eradicated other species. We did not rely on single solutions. We relied on patterns that could be reactivated under stress. As I sit now in the quiet, listening to the low hum of instruments, I feel connected to this long reverberation. My thoughts, my questions, even my doubts are echoes too. Reflections shaped by generations of inquiry and survival. Science itself is an echo, a formalized extension of ancient observation, refined but rooted in the same impulse to notice patterns and adapt. In the end, traveller, it's all right to not understand every echo. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again, sending vibrations through time, reminding us that nothing meaningful ever fully disappears. Sleep gently, traveller. Let the echoes carry you. The cosmos will keep watch, repeating itself softly, endlessly, as it always has. Observer, imagine, standing high above the earth, watching human movement not as individuals but as currents flowing and folding across the surface of a restless planet. From this distance lives blur into trajectories, decisions into tendencies, chance into structure. What emerges is not chaos but pattern, not a rigid design but a recurring shape, repeating with variation across time and geography. Pattern is what remains when enough echoes overlap, when enough resets leave similar residues behind. For 90,000 years, humanity traced these patterns unknowingly. Migration followed climate like a shadow. Technology advanced only when conditions allowed. Social structures expanded and contracted in rhythm with resources. This was not destiny written in advance. It was probability sculpted by constraint. When you map it carefully, the past reveals itself less as a story of events, and more as a system responding to forces far larger than any single group. Patterns appear first in movement. Humans spread when corridors opened and retreated when they closed. Land bridges emerged and vanished. Rivers shifted course. Deserts expanded and softened. Each change redirected the flow of populations like gravity redirecting light. No one commanded this motion. It emerged from countless local decisions, each rational within its context, together forming a global choreography invisible to its participants. There is a strange comfort in recognizing this. It means that survival was not miraculous, nor was extinction arbitrary. Humanity endured because it moved when movement was possible and paused when it was not. Pattern replaced planning. Flexibility replaced foresight. Over time, this created a species exquisitely sensitive to environmental signals, capable of adjusting behavior before catastrophe became terminal. Technology follows pattern as well. Stone tools diversify when populations grow and environments stabilize. They simplify when stress increases. This oscillation repeats across continents. Complexity rises, then collapses, then rises again. Each cycle leaves a faint imprint, a memory of possibility carried forward. Civilization would later mistake one of these rises for a permanent state. The deeper pattern shows otherwise. Social organization also reveals repetition. Small egalitarian groups dominate under instability. Hierarchy emerges when density increases. Leadership remains provisional until permanence demands structure. Conflict resolution relies on mediation when relationships are intimate, and shifts toward formal enforcement when anonymity grows. These are not cultural accidents. They are responses to scale. Pattern governs what is viable. I have traced these repetitions through datasets late into the night, watching graphs align across eras that never met. It is humbling. It suggests that human choice operates within corridors defined by physics, ecology, and biology. Freedom exists, but it is bounded. We improvise inside constraints, and over time those improvisations converge. Pattern also explains why civilization appeared independently in multiple regions. Different crops, different animals, different myths. The same underlying trajectory. Stable climate, rising population density, surplus accumulation, social complexity. This convergence is not coincidence. It is pattern asserting itself once conditions cross certain thresholds. Humanity did not invent civilization once. It unlocked it repeatedly when the door finally stayed open. Yet pattern is not fate. Small deviations matter. A drought here, a flood there. A technological insight spreading slightly faster. These perturbations create divergence within repetition. This is why no two civilizations are identical, even if they follow similar arcs. Pattern sets the stage. Contingency writes the details. In the long pre-civilized age, pattern remained dominant because perturbations rarely accumulated. Resets erased momentum before it could compound. Only when stability persisted long enough did deviations amplify, allowing lasting transformation. Civilization required not just intelligence but sustained pattern interruption. This realization reframes the earlier silence. The quiet was not absence of activity. It was pattern maintaining equilibrium. Humanity existed in a dynamic balance with its environment rarely pushing far enough to break symmetry. When the balance finally shifted, the change felt sudden only because the pattern had held for so long. There is something deeply scientific about this view. It replaces heroic narratives with systemic ones. It treats humanity as part of Earth's processes rather than separate from them. Culture becomes a form of weather. Technology a geological force in slow formation. Memory a field shaped by repeated exposure. As a scientist, I find peace in this. Pattern does not diminish human meaning. It situates it. It shows that our achievements arise not from isolation but from alignment with larger forces. It also warns us. When we ignore pattern, when we assume exemption from cycles, instability grows. The ancient pattern is still active. Climate shifts again. Populations concentrate. Complexity increases. The echoes of past resets vibrate faintly beneath modern life. We have more buffers now, more tools, more knowledge. But the underlying system remains. Gravity has not changed. Biology has not changed. Only scale has. Sometimes I imagine future observers mapping our era as we map the deep past. They will see patterns we cannot. They will note our deviations, our accelerations, our assumptions. They will recognize familiar shapes beneath unfamiliar technologies. Pattern endures even when expression transforms. In quiet moments, I remind myself that understanding pattern does not grant control, it grants humility. It invites us to listen to long rhythms rather than short impulses. It suggests that sustainability lies not in constant growth, but in respecting thresholds. In the end, observer, it's all right to not understand every pattern. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again, tracing ancient geometries through time and life. Sleep now, observer, let the patterns carry you gently. The cosmos will keep watch, repeating itself with infinite patience, as it always has. Listener, imagine a signal emerging not as sound or light, but as tension, a subtle tightening in the fabric of patterns that once flowed smoothly. Warnings in deep time rarely arrive as sudden alarms. They arrive as small deviations, as stresses accumulating quietly until balance begins to strain. In the long age before civilization, warnings were written into landscapes, climates, bodies, and behaviours. They were not spoken, they were felt. For tens of thousands of years, humanity lived within margins narrow enough that warnings could not be ignored. A failed season meant hunger, a misread migration meant death. The environment communicated constantly, and survival depended on listening. Warning signs were immediate and personal. The world responded quickly to mistakes. This intimacy trained the human mind to recognize danger early, to adjust before catastrophe completed its work. As populations grew and knowledge accumulated, some warnings became easier to miss. Small successes created confidence. Abundance softened caution. During brief periods of stability, humans experimented with longer stays, denser gatherings, heavier investments in place. These experiments often worked at first. Then conditions shifted. Resources thinned. Conflict rose. Networks strained. The warning was not collapse itself, but the erosion of flexibility. Archaeology captures this tension imperfectly. We see longer occupations followed by abandonment. Toolkits grow specialized, then suddenly simplify. Trade networks extend farther, then snap. These are not random fluctuations. They are warning signals that complexity was outpacing resilience. The environment was reminding humanity of limits. I remember studying a site where layers told this story clearly. A period of prosperity marked by variety and exchange, followed by abrupt reduction. Fewer materials, fewer connections. The people did not vanish because they failed. They withdrew because the cost of staying grew too high. This retreat was wisdom. It preserved lives by sacrificing ambition. Warnings also appeared in the body. Nutritional stress left marks on bones. Disease patterns shifted with density. Repetitive labour reshaped skeletons when lifestyles changed too quickly. These biological records are quiet but insistent. They show that the human body responds to social and environmental strain long before systems collapse completely. The body warns first. In the deep past, these warnings were heeded because consequences were immediate. There was no buffer large enough to delay feedback. Today, distance and technology soften signals, allowing imbalance to grow unnoticed. But the ancient warning remains encoded in us, as unease, anxiety, and a sense that something is misaligned, even when material conditions seem secure. Warnings are not predictions, they are thresholds. Cross them and the system behaves differently. Early humans learned this through repetition. They learned when to disperse, when to reduce consumption, when to abandon a place entirely. Mobility was their response to warning. It allowed reset without collapse. This ability to leave is often overlooked. Modern societies invest heavily in staying. Walls infrastructure permanence. Pre-civilized humanity invested in leaving. Light shelters, portable tools, knowledge stored in people rather than places. When warning signs appeared, departure was not failure. It was strategy. There is something profoundly unsettling about recognizing this difference. It suggests that some of our deepest instincts evolved not to build, but to move. Not to accumulate, but to adapt. Civilization required suppressing some of these instincts. It rewarded staying even when warning signs accumulated. This trade-off produced remarkable achievements, but also new vulnerabilities. In the long preparation before civilization, warnings kept humanity from outrunning its environment. They enforced humility. Every attempt to exceed carrying capacity was corrected. Every push toward permanence was tested by instability. This constant feedback shaped a species cautious of overcommitment. I sometimes imagine what warnings look like from a planetary perspective. A rise in atmospheric particles, a shift in isotope ratios, a thinning of genetic diversity. These are Earth's instruments recording stress, the way seismographs record pressure before earthquakes. Humanity was once highly sensitive to these signals, even without understanding them conceptually. As I sit quietly reviewing data late at night, I feel the weight of this ancient lesson. Warning is not doom. It is information. It is the system asking for adjustment. Ignoring it does not make it go away. It merely delays consequence. The pre-civilized world survived because warnings were integrated into behavior quickly. There was no ideology of endless growth, no promise that tomorrow would be better simply because yesterday was. Improvement was conditional, provisional, reversible. This mindset allowed humanity to persist through cycles that erased less flexible species. Warning also shaped culture. Stories of floods, fires, darkness, and return appear everywhere. These are not fantasies. They are memories abstracted into narrative, teaching future generations to recognize danger without needing to experience it directly. Myth was an early warning system, compressing hard lessons into symbols that could travel through time. As civilization approached, these warnings did not disappear. They grew quieter, easier to ignore amid abundance. But they remained. They always do. Systems cannot be fooled indefinitely. The deep past teaches that resilience depends on listening, even when silence feels safer. In the end, listener, it's all right to not understand every warning. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again, reminding us that caution is not fear, but intelligence shaped by survival. Sleep now, listener. Let the warning soften into awareness. The cosmos will keep watch, and the ancient signals will continue to pulse gently beneath everything we build. Traveller, imagine lifting your eyes from the ground, for the first time after a long season of survival, seeing the sky not as background but as presence. Above you stretches a moving archive of light, a slow theatre of cycles repeating with patient precision. Long before cities, before calendars carved in stone, the sky was humanity's first enduring structure. It never collapsed, it never flooded, it never burned. It returned every night unchanged enough to trust, dynamic enough to read. For 90,000 years, the sky was the most reliable companion humans had. The sky taught time before language named it. The sun rose and fell with mechanical certainty. The moon grew and vanished in steady rhythm. Stars shifted their positions just enough to mark seasons, migrations, and returns. For people living in a world where the ground itself betrayed memory, the sky offered continuity. Landscapes changed, rivers moved, coasts drowned. But Orion always climbed the same arc. The Milky Way always spilled across darkness like frozen breath. Above catastrophe pattern endured. I often think about how early humans must have experienced this. Nights without artificial light would have been overwhelming to modern eyes. The sky would dominate perception, pressing close, vast, and intimate at once. It was impossible to ignore. You could lose your shelter, your tools, even your companions, but the sky remained. In this sense, it became the first map, the first clock, the first storybook. Knowledge was written in light long before it was written in symbols. Evidence suggests that sky awareness emerged early, not as abstract astronomy, but as embodied orientation. Navigation followed stars. Seasonal movements aligned with celestial cues. Myths encoded sky events into memory. These were not superstitions, they were survival technologies. When environments shifted unpredictably, the sky provided an external reference frame immune to local chaos. It anchored humanity to something larger than immediate circumstance. The sky also offered perspective. Under its vastness, individual struggles shrank. Hunger, fear, loss, all occurred beneath something immeasurably older and larger. This did not make suffering disappear, but it contextualized it. The universe continued regardless. There is comfort in that continuity. Even today, when modern life overwhelms, people instinctively look upward. The impulse is ancient. During resets, when ash darkened days and cold stole warmth, the sky became unreadable. Stars vanished behind haze. The sun dimmed. This loss would have been deeply unsettling, not only because of physical consequences, but because orientation itself failed. When the sky disappears, uncertainty multiplies. It is no coincidence that myths of darkness accompany memories of catastrophe. They are records of disorientation as much as destruction. When the sky returned, clarity followed. Patterns re-emerged, navigation resumed, time regained shape. The return of stars signaled not just survival but the restoration of meaning. In this way, the sky functioned as psychological infrastructure. It stabilized minds when the ground could not. I imagine elders teaching children to read the sky during quiet nights, pointing without words, waiting patiently for patterns to appear. Knowledge transmitted slowly reinforced nightly. This form of education required no permanence. It relied on repetition and observation. It fit perfectly within a mobile life. The sky was the ultimate portable archive. Over tens of thousands of years, this relationship deepened. Humans began to project stories onto stars, not because stars demanded it, but because memory did. Story transformed random points of light into structured narratives easier to recall. Orion became a hunter. The Pleiades became sisters. These stories were not idle fantasies. They encoded direction, seasons, and social values. Myth and navigation intertwined. What fascinates me is how this celestial focus shaped cognition. Thinking in cycles rather than straight lines. Expecting return rather than finality. Understanding time as repetition with variation. These mental models mirror the sky itself. Civilization would later impose linear timelines, progress narratives, and irreversible histories. But beneath those constructs, the cyclical sky still influences how we feel time passing. As a scientist, I am aware that stars are not fixed. They move, evolve, explode. But on human timescales, they appear eternal. This illusion of permanence was useful. It gave early humans a stable reference long before they could comprehend astrophysics. The sky did not need to be understood fully to be trusted. Even now, when I work late into the night, I sometimes step outside and look up. Instruments hum behind me. Data waits. But the sky reminds me that knowledge begins with observation, not control. Our ancestors understood this intuitively. They read what they could and accepted what they could not. The sky also blurred boundaries between science and meaning. There was no separation. Observation and interpretation were one process. A comet was both object and omen, an eclipse was both shadow and signal. This integration did not hinder survival. It enhanced it. It kept attention focused on change. As civilization approached, sky knowledge did not vanish. It intensified. Calendars formalized observation. Monuments aligned with solstices. Writing fixed celestial events into record. But the foundation remained pre-civilized. The sky was already central to human thought long before walls rose. In recognizing this, I feel a quiet continuity. The same sky watched over small bands and vast empires alike. It watched civilizations rise and fall without judgment. It remains indifferent and generous in equal measure. This constancy links us directly to those who lived tens of thousands of years ago. We share the same ceiling of light. In the end, traveller, it's all right to not understand everything written above us. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again through stars older than humanity itself. Sleep now, traveller. Let the sky hold your thoughts. The cosmos will keep watch as it always has, turning slowly above all beginnings and endings. Listener, imagine lowering your gaze from the sky back to the ground beneath your feet, feeling the slow patience of Earth itself. The planet does not hurry. Mountains rise and erode in silence. Rivers carve memory into stone grain by grain. Soil forms from the quiet labour of time thinking. For most of human existence, Earth was not scenery. It was partner, teacher, and test. Long before civilization tried to command it, humanity learned to listen. The earth spoke through texture, through the hardness of stone chosen for tools, through the softness of soil that held water after rain, through the smell of approaching storms and the taste of minerals in spring-fed streams. Knowledge of earth was not abstract. It was intimate, learned by walking, touching, tasting, and returning. Every step added information. Every season corrected memory. Survival depended on reading subtle signals long before instruments could name them. For 90,000 years, humans lived close enough to Earth that mistakes were immediate. Camp in the wrong place and flood would come. Follow the wrong herd and hunger followed. Misjudge the land and cold or heat corrected you without mercy. This feedback shaped a relationship based on humility. Earth was not an enemy, but it was never passive. It responded to every action, always teaching. Archaeological evidence shows this attentiveness everywhere. Camps positioned near multiple resources, never reliant on one. Tools adapted to local stone rather than forcing uniformity. Diets varied seasonally, reducing pressure on any single source. These were not conscious sustainability policies. They were habits formed through repeated loss and survival. Humanity learned that Earth punishes rigidity. I think often of how much of this knowledge is invisible to us now. Modern life buffers us from immediate feedback. Mistakes take time to surface. Consequences spread across systems rather than striking directly. But our bodies still carry ancient expectations. We sense unease when rhythms break. We feel comfort when patterns align. This is Earth memory moving through us. Earth also resets. Floods erase paths. Fires clear forests. Ice grinds landscapes smooth. These processes are not accidents. They are Earth maintaining balance. Humanity learned to move with these resets rather than resist them. When a place became hostile, people left. When it healed, they returned. This mobility prevented overexploitation and allowed ecosystems to recover. Earth and humanity entered a quiet negotiation. The forgotten coastlines tell this story. Vast plains, once rich with life, now lie underwater, erased by rising seas after ice ages ended. Entire ways of living vanished beneath waves. Not because they failed, but because Earth shifted. The loss of these landscapes is not just loss of land, but loss of memory. The archaeological record is biased toward what remained above water. Earth decides what is remembered. In this, Earth acts as archivist. It keeps some things and releases others. Preservation is not moral, it is conditional. Stone survives, wood decays, bone fractures. The record we read is filtered through geology. This should humble us. What we call history is not a complete account. It is a collaboration between human action and Earth's tolerance. There is a quiet intelligence in this filtering. Earth prevents any one narrative from dominating too long. It erases excess levels, imbalance restores possibility. Humanity survived because it adapted to this rhythm. Civilization would later attempt to resist it, building permanence against impermanence. The tension between these impulses defines much of human history. I remember standing on an eroded hillside, layers exposed like pages, each one representing thousands of years. Human presence appeared as thin lines, interrupted, never continuous. Earth interrupted us repeatedly, not out of malice but indifference. Survival meant aligning with that indifference rather than opposing it. Earth also shaped human time perception. Seasons mattered more than years. Cycles mattered more than milestones. Planting and harvesting rhythms replaced abstract calendars. This cyclical thinking reinforced patience. It taught that loss could be followed by renewal, that absence did not mean end. Earth demonstrated this endlessly through regeneration. As agriculture approached, this relationship began to change. Humans started modifying Earth rather than reading it, clearing fields, redirecting water, storing surplus. These actions increased control but reduced flexibility. The feedback loop slowed, consequences delayed. Earth still responded, but over longer timescales. This shift enabled civilization, but it also planted seeds of future imbalance. Yet the deep memory remains. When disasters strike, people still return to Earth instincts. Seek high ground, find water, share resources, move if necessary. These responses are ancient. They surface when systems fail. Earth calls us back to basics, and we remember more than we realize. There is comfort in this continuity. It means that beneath layers of technology, humanity remains grounded in planetary processes. We are not separate from Earth. We are expressions of it, shaped by its rhythms, constrained by its limits, sustained by its patience. As I sit quietly feeling the weight of this realization, I accept that understanding Earth fully is impossible. It operates on scales beyond our perception. But listening is enough. It has always been enough. In the end, listener, it's all right to not understand everything beneath us. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again through stone soil and slow movement. Sleep now, listener. Let the earth hold you. The planet will keep watch, turning silently beneath the stars as it always has. Traveller, imagine the moment when a long journey bends inward, when movement across distance becomes a movement back toward origin. Not a return to a place on a map, but a return to awareness. After tens of thousands of years wandering across continents, climates and epochs, humanity began to circle back towards something it had never truly left. It returned to itself. This return was not sudden. It did not announce itself with banners or monuments. It arrived quietly like dusk settling over a familiar landscape. People still hunted, gathered, walked and waited. But beneath these actions, something subtle had shifted. Knowledge had accumulated like sediment. Patterns once invisible had become faintly recognizable. The world felt less chaotic, not because it was safer, but because humans had learned how to read it. For most of prehistory, survival required constant outward attention. Watch the horizon, track the herd, listen for predators, read the sky. But as techniques stabilized, attention slowly turned inward. Around fires during long nights, stories grew more complex. Not just accounts of what happened, but reflections on why. Memory thickened, identity deepened. Humans began to recognize themselves not only as bodies moving through land, but as minds moving through time. This was the beginning of return. I imagine a small group resting after a successful season. Food stored, shelters repaired, no immediate crisis demanding action. In that pause, thought wandered. Someone noticed that certain plants always appeared after rain. Someone else remembered that seeds dropped near camp sometimes grew. These were not revelations yet, just curiosities. But curiosity is the first step toward return because it turns experience into reflection. Return also meant remembering loss, extinct animals, flooded coastlines, abandoned routes. Humanity carried grief forward even without words for it. Stories preserved warnings disguised as myths. Fires that consumed entire forests. Waters that swallowed land. Cold that lingered for generations. These memories shaped restraint. They taught that Earth could give and take without explanation. Return meant respecting that power rather than challenging it. As population slowly increased, encounters between groups became more frequent. Exchange networks expanded. Languages diversified but remained permeable. Through these interactions, humans compared ways of living. They observed differences and similarities. Some groups lingered longer in one place. Others moved constantly. No single strategy dominated. Return was not convergence, but awareness of options. I think of return as a spiral rather than a circle. Humans revisited old behaviours, but with new understanding. Fire had been used for hundreds of thousands of years, yet now it organised space and time. Storage had existed in simple forms, yet now it anchored seasonal return to certain places. Movement continued, but it followed more predictable rhythms. The land began to feel familiar in a new way. Return also happened within the body. Diets changed slowly, digestion adapted, muscles remembered repetitive tasks. Hands learned precision through generations of tool-making. Neural pathways strengthened through storytelling, cooperation and teaching. Biology responded to culture, and culture responded to environment. This feedback loop deepened humanity's sense of belonging to the world. There were moments, I suspect, when individuals felt the weight of this change without understanding it. A sense that life was becoming denser, more layered, that the future mattered in ways it hadn't before. Children were taught not only how to survive tomorrow, but how to prepare for seasons they would not personally see. This is return to continuity, the recognition that existence extends beyond individual lifetimes. The land itself participated in this return. After long periods of instability, climates began to calm. Seasons grew more reliable. Rivers followed familiar courses. These changes were subtle on a human timescale, but noticeable across generations. Elders recognized patterns holding steady longer than before. Trust slowly shifted from mobility to presence. Staying began to feel possible. Return did not erase wandering. It reframed it. Movement became choice rather than necessity. Camps became anchors rather than pauses. Paths became routes remembered and reused. The earth was no longer entirely unpredictable, but it was never fully tame. This balance encouraged experimentation without abandoning caution. I imagine the quiet excitement of realizing that tomorrow might resemble today. That effort invested now could pay off later, that seeds saved could become food, that shelters repaired could be reused. These realizations did not demand civilization, but they made it conceivable. Return opened the door. As a scientist, I'm careful not to romanticize this moment. Return carried costs. Staying increased vulnerability to disease. Surplus attracted conflict. Familiarity bred hierarchy. But before those consequences unfolded, there was a fragile equilibrium. A moment when humanity stood between endless movement and permanent settlement, holding both possibilities. This liminal state fascinates me. It represents humanity at its most reflective. Not yet committed to dominance, not content with mere survival. Asking questions without rushing answers. Watching the land and itself with equal curiosity. This is the return I feel when I study prehistory late at night, maps spread across my desk, dust settling quietly on forgotten notes. In that silence I sense the humility of those early returners. They did not know where their path led. They only knew that they were no longer drifting blindly. Patterns had emerged. Memory had depth. The future had shape. Return also meant the strengthening of place-based identity. Landscapes became part of self-concept. Stories anchored to specific hills, rivers and stones. Sacredness emerged not as abstraction, but as familiarity intensified. A place mattered because it had been known deeply repeatedly across generations. Losing it meant losing part of identity. This attachment would later fuel both creation and conflict, but at this stage it simply grounded people. It gave them reference points. Earth stopped being infinite and became intimate. This intimacy fostered care, but also expectation. Return always carries risk because it invites dependence. Yet humanity moved forward guided by instinct honed through millennia. Slowly, carefully, with hesitation encoded into culture. Agriculture would eventually formalize return, but before that there was this quiet threshold. A long breath held between movement and stillness. As I reflect on this, I realize that return is not something humanity completed. It is ongoing. We oscillate between expansion and reflection, between reaching outward and turning inward. Modern life feels distant from these ancient rhythms, yet they persist beneath our systems. When people feel disconnected today, they often seek return, to nature, to simplicity, to meaning. These impulses are echoes of that first turning inward when humanity recognized itself as part of a longer story. In the end, traveller return is not about going backward. It is about remembering forward, carrying accumulated wisdom into new forms without losing awareness of its origins. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again, reminding us that movement and stillness are not opposites, but phases of the same journey. Rest now, traveller. You are not lost in space. You are part of it. Sleep gently as humanity once did beneath open skies, returning again and again to the quiet centre from which all paths begin. Observer, there comes a moment in every long investigation when data quiets and interpretation takes a step back. Instruments are powered down, charts remain unfinished. The mind stops trying to force conclusions and allows the shape, of what has been learned to settle on its own. This is that moment. Reflection is not the absence of thought. It is thought slowing to the speed of meaning. For 90,000 years, humanity lived without knowing where it was going, yet somehow moving with purpose. Not a purpose written down or spoken aloud, but one expressed through persistence. Each generation inherited questions they could not answer, and tools they did not fully understand, and they carried both forward anyway. Reflection in this sense was never a luxury. It was survival turned inward. I often imagine early humans staring into firelight after long days, the flicker illuminating faces shaped by fatigue and familiarity. In those moments, reflection emerged naturally, not as philosophy, but as awareness. Why did this hunt succeed while the last failed? Why did the rains arrive early this year? Why did the stars return to the same places? These questions did not demand solutions, they shaped attention. Reflection allowed pattern recognition. It turned repetition into expectation, and expectation into preparation. It gave memory direction. Without reflection, experience dissolves into noise. With it, experience becomes knowledge. This process unfolded slowly, quietly, across tens of thousands of years, invisible to those living it, yet transformative in retrospect. Modern science mirrors this ancient rhythm more than we admit. Data accumulation means little without reflection. Discovery requires pauses. The most meaningful insights arrive not during frantic activity but in stillness, late nights, empty rooms, the quiet acceptance that some answers will not arrive on command. As a scientist, I have learned to trust these pauses, to sit with uncertainty without rushing to resolve it. Prehistoric humanity mastered this long before equations existed. They lived inside uncertainty and learned to coexist with it. Reflection was embedded in their lives because unpredictability demanded it. This is why the idea of stagnation during those 90,000 years is misleading. What appears static from afar was dynamic from within. Change happened internally first. Cognition deepened. Social awareness sharpened. Emotional complexity expanded. These shifts left faint traces archaeologically, but they shaped everything that followed. Reflection also tempered ambition. Without the illusion of control, humans respected limits. They did not mistake survival for mastery. Earth remained larger than intention. Weather exceeded planning. Animals resisted domination. Reflection taught humility not as ideology, but as adaptation. I feel this humility when reading the archaeological record. Gaps speak louder than artifacts. Missing centuries, abandoned sites, technologies that appeared and vanished. These absences remind us that progress was never guaranteed. Reflection includes acknowledging what was lost. There is a quiet grief embedded in this history. Entire lifeways erased by rising seas or shifting climates. Knowledge that died with elders whose stories were never retold. Reflection honours these losses without attempting to recover them fully. Some knowledge is not meant to be restored. It exists as absence-shaping caution. In our modern world, reflection is often framed as indulgent or unproductive. But our discomfort with stillness reveals how far we have drifted from ancient rhythms. The Paleolithic mind understood that reflection conserves energy. It prevents wasteful repetition. It refines action before it occurs. This is why even today the human mind seeks reflection during exhaustion. Sleep itself is a form of reflection. Neural patterns replay, memories reorganize, meaning consolidates. The body rests while the mind integrates. This nightly ritual is a direct inheritance from ancestors who depended on integration as much as action. When I allow myself to reflect on this vast timeline, I feel smaller but also steadier. Individual urgency fades, perspective expands, problems that feel overwhelming shrink against the backdrop of endurance measured in millennia. Reflection restores proportion. It also restores compassion. Prehistoric humans were not failures waiting to succeed. They were complete within their context. They laughed, loved, feared, hoped. They were not incomplete versions of us. We are incomplete versions of them, lacking the intimacy with time and earth that shaped their resilience. Reflection invites us to reclaim some of that intimacy, Not by rejecting technology, but by remembering that speed is not synonymous with progress. That meaning grows in pauses. That understanding matures when we allow questions to breathe. As the night deepens, reflection softens into acceptance. The need to know recedes. Curiosity remains, but without tension. This is the state our ancestors returned to again and again, sitting beneath open skies, listening to silence without fear. In the end, observer, it's all right to not understand everything that brought us here. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Reflection does not close questions. It creates space around them. Tonight, the universe whispers again, not with answers, but with reassurance. You are not behind. You are part of a long unfolding. Rest now. Let reflection carry you gently towards sleep. The cosmos will continue its patient thinking, and you may drift. Knowing that understanding is not a destination, but a rhythm, one breath at a time. Listener. This is the hour when effort dissolves and attention becomes soft enough to float. The journey has carried you through deep time across vanished coastlines and patient skies, and now it slows without resistance. Nothing more is required from you. The story does not need to be held. It can rest beside you, breathing quietly as night completes its work. Imagine the world easing its grip layer by layer. First, the sharp edges blur. Colours dim into a narrow spectrum of shadow and glow. Sound does not stop, but it spreads out, leaving long, comfortable spaces between each echo. Even thought begins to stretch unhurried, no longer pressing forward. This is not emptiness. It is spaciousness, the kind that invites rest. For 90,000 years, sleep was a contract made nightly between human bodies and an unpredictable planet. To sleep was to trust that danger would pass, that fire would remain warm, that the morning would arrive. That trust shaped the nervous system long before language named it. Muscles learned to loosen, breathing learned to slow, awareness learned when it could safely dim. Your body remembers this agreement. Tonight, there is no hunt to plan, no migration to anticipate, no storm demanding vigilance. The signals that once kept humans alert have quieted. What remains is the ancient permission to let consciousness descend gently without fear of falling too far. As you rest here, consider how sleep was once shared. Bodies close together, warmth, overlapping breath, sinking in the dark. Sleep was communal, a soft chorus of slowing rhythms. Even alone now, you are not truly solitary. You are connected to a lineage of sleepers stretching back through time, each one surrendering awareness, in turn keeping the chain unbroken. Thought may still flicker. Images may rise and fade. You might notice memories from the story rearranging themselves. This is the mind doing what it does best when not commanded. It sorts without urgency. It weaves without instruction. You do not need to follow these movements. Watching is enough. Or not watching at all. There is a moment just before deeper sleep when the sense of self loosens. Boundaries soften. You may feel lighter or heavier or neither. Sensations drift without needing names. This moment can feel strange if resisted, but if allowed, it feels like being carried by something older than intention. That something is rhythm. The planet rotates beneath you at a steady pace, unbothered by your wakefulness or rest. Gravity holds without effort. Air moves in and out of your lungs without asking permission. These systems have been reliable companions since before you were aware of them. They do not fail when you stop paying attention. They function best when allowed to do so alone. I have learned this during long nights sitting with unanswered questions, when the impulse to solve gave way to the wisdom of pause. The most meaningful insights never arrived when forced. They surfaced later quietly, after sleep had reorganized the mind without supervision. Rest is not the opposite of understanding. It is one of its conditions. Notice now how the body signals readiness. The jaw releases, shoulders sink. The space behind the eyes grows distant and warm. Breathing lengthens. These are not instructions. They are invitations extended by biology, refined through countless generations. Accepting them requires no skill. If you feel resistance, that is all right. Resistance too will tire and soften. Nothing needs to be corrected. Sleep does not demand perfection. It arrives when conditions allow, and conditions are forming now. The vastness of time that once felt overwhelming begins to feel gentle here. 90,000 years compress into a sensation rather than a number, a sense of continuity, a reassurance that life has always known how to continue even through darkness, especially through darkness. In prehistoric nights, stars offered orientation but not comfort. Comfort came from the ground, from warmth, from the knowledge that others were nearby breathing in the same rhythm. That rhythm remains accessible now. You can feel it in your own chest, steady and patient. Let the story recede further. Details are no longer necessary. Faces blur into silhouettes. Fires become embers without heat. Paths fade into open ground. None of this is loss. It is integration. The mind is filing away what it needs and releasing what it does not. There is a particular safety in this release. When nothing is demanded, the nervous system shifts from readiness to repair. Cells restore. Memories consolidate. Emotional weight redistributes. This work happens best without awareness. You are allowed to be absent while it continues. Somewhere beyond immediate perception, ancient processes persist. Ice moves. Oceans circulate. Light travels across unimaginable distances. These events do not pause for sleep, yet they do not require wakefulness either. The universe is indifferent in a way that allows rest. It does not depend on your attention to remain intact. If a thought returns, let it pass like a distant signal acknowledged but not engaged. You do not need to complete it. Incomplete thoughts dissolve naturally when not pursued. This dissolution is not failure, it is efficiency. You may feel the edge of dreaming approaching, images without logic, sensations without cause. This threshold is familiar to your brain, though it may feel novel to awareness. Dreams are not interruptions. They are continuations in another language. As descent deepens, time perception loosens. Minutes lose shape. Duration becomes irrelevant. This is another inheritance from ancestors who measured life in seasons rather than seconds. The body knows how to exist without clocks. There is nothing left to hold, nothing left to anticipate. The story has guided you to this quiet, and now it steps aside. What remains is presence without effort. In the end, listener, it's all right to not understand where sleep carries you. Some mysteries wait, others watch. You do not need to accompany them tonight. Tonight the universe whispers again, barely audible now, as if speaking only to itself. Silence is the universe thinking, and you are invited to stop thinking along with it. Sleep, listener. Let awareness sink gently below the surface. You are safe. You are held. The cosmos will keep watch as you drift unburdened into rest. Traveller. This is the final stillness, the place beyond progression, where the long human story exhales and releases you from its weight. Nothing more needs to be added. Nothing needs to be remembered with precision. The journey has done its work, not by delivering answers, but by guiding you toward quiet acceptance. Here the mind no longer leans forward. It rests back into something older than intention. For 90,000 years, humanity survived without knowing where it was headed. That uncertainty did not weaken our ancestors. It strengthened them. They lived without guarantees, yet they trusted the continuation of life itself. Each night they lay down without maps of the future, believing sometimes consciously, often instinctively, that morning would come. That belief shaped the human nervous system long before philosophy tried to explain it. You are resting inside that same inheritance. The long ages before civilization were not empty stretches waiting for meaning. They were filled with experience, repetition, adjustment, and quiet mastery. Survival became an art practiced, slowly refined across generations. Tools changed, languages shifted, landscapes transformed. But beneath all of it, the human capacity to endure remained constant. That endurance did not shout. It whispered, repeating itself through habit, through memory, through the willingness to continue even when outcomes were unknown. As the story concludes, it does not close a chapter. It dissolves the idea of chapters entirely. Time no longer feels segmented. Past and present soften into a single continuum. The person you are now is not separate from those early humans who rested beneath open skies. Your breathing follows patterns shaped by their nights. Your capacity to let go was practiced long before you were born. Civilization may have accelerated life-compressed distance, amplified complexity, but it did not erase this deeper rhythm. When the world becomes overwhelming, when meaning feels fragmented, the body remembers how to descend. It remembers how to rest without justification. Sleep is not learned, it is remembered. Notice how little effort is required now. Muscles release without instruction. Thoughts slow without argument. Awareness becomes gentle, no longer scanning, no longer anticipating. This is not collapse, it is return. Return to a state where existence does not require explanation to be valid. The universe does not demand your wakefulness. Stars burn whether observed or not. Earth turns without needing acknowledgement. Life continues its intricate processes far beyond conscious supervision. Understanding this allows rest to arrive without guilt. You're not abandoning responsibility. You're participating in a cycle older than responsibility itself. In deep time, survival depended on this ability to pause. Exhaustion dulled perception. Rest restored it. Sleep was not a luxury. It was a technology refined through evolution, ensuring that learning could consolidate, that bodies could repair, that memory could organize itself quietly. The most important work has always happened when awareness stepped aside. Tonight is no different. As thoughts drift further apart, you may feel the edge of dreaming approach. Images without logic, sensations without cause. This threshold is familiar to your brain, though it may feel distant to conscious thought. Dreams are not distractions. They are continuations carrying experience forward in a different language. If nothing appears, that is also fine. Dreamless sleep is not emptiness. It is depth without imagery, rest without narrative. Both are valid. Both serve. The long human story does not pause when you sleep. It continues through others, through systems, through the quiet motion of Earth beneath the stars. You're allowed to step out of awareness temporarily. Nothing essential will be missed. Nothing fragile will collapse in your absence. In this final moment, let gratitude arise naturally without direction. Gratitude for endurance, for continuity, for the fact that you exist at all, carried here by countless generations who survived without knowing you would follow. Their persistence made this moment possible. Your rest honors it more than effort ever could. In the end, traveller, it is all right to not understand everything that brought us here. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Neither require resolution tonight. Tonight the universe whispers again, not as a call to explore, but as permission to rest. Silence is the universe thinking, and you are invited to stop thinking along with it. Sleep now, traveller. Let awareness sink gently below the surface. You are safe, you are held. The cosmos will keep watch as you drift into quiet, carrying the long human story forward without effort, one breath at a time. Traveller, before silence fully claims you. There is one more gentle settling, like the last ember dimming without going cold. The mind loosens its final knot, releasing the need to witness its own descent. Nothing follows this moment except rest, and rest does not require narration. Across deep time, endings were rare. Nights blended into mornings. Stories trailed off into sleep. The human nervous system learned that closure was unnecessary for safety. Continuity mattered more than conclusion. What carried people forward was not certainty, but rhythm repeated until trust became automatic. You may notice a widening calm now, as if space itself has slowed. This is not emptiness, it is capacity. A place where breath moves freely uncounted, and sensation softens at the edges. Here the body remembers how to be without effort, how to exist without evaluation. Instruments would show it if we measured. Heart rate settling, muscles releasing microtensions, neural chatter thinning. These are ancient signatures consistent across cultures and eras. Long before beds and walls sleep arrived under open skies, the same way reliable as gravity. I find comfort in that reliability. It reminds me that even when knowledge fails, physiology persists. Even when meaning fractures, the body knows how to repair. Sleep is not fragile. It is resilient, reinforced by millions of nights that came before this one. As awareness dims, identity becomes less defined. Names matter less. Roles dissolve. What remains is presence without edges like fog resting on still water. This state is not loss. It is relief. The effort of being someone relaxes into the simplicity of being. If dreams come, let them come. If they do not, let that be enough. The universe does not grade your rest. It does not require productivity from your unconscious. Repair proceeds regardless of narrative. Somewhere far beyond immediate perception, dawn is already forming. Photons are gathering. Rotations continue. But none of that belongs to you right now. This interval is protected. A pause in which nothing can intrude unless invited. You're not forgetting the story, you are integrating it. Memory does its best work when unobserved. Tomorrow fragments may return differently shaped, lighter, less demanding, or they may not return at all. Both outcomes are successful. In the quiet beyond thought, the long arc of humanity rests with you. Not as obligation, but as companionship. Generations have slept this way, trusting the dark, trusting the body, trusting that continuation does not require vigilance. Sleep, traveller. Let the final ember fade. Let the last question release. The cosmos will keep watch, and you may drift without weight, without effort, without end. Breath by breath, the night deepens kindly. No task waits, no signal calls. The present narrows to warmth and slow rhythm. If waking returns, it will arrive gently. Until then, surrender is safe. Let gravity cradle thought. Let darkness be generous. Let rest finish what time began quietly, patiently, completely. Here nothing else is required. Sleep holds you steady and sure through the dark. Traveller. We've reached the quiet edge of tonight's journey. The path that carried us through forgotten epochs. Long silences and the slow patience of deep time begins to soften here like footprints fading in ancient dust. Nothing needs to be concluded. Nothing needs to be proven. We have simply walked far enough for the story to rest. For a moment, let the weight of 90,000 years feel small rather than heavy. All those lives, all that endurance unfolding without certainty, without witnesses, without knowing what would come next. Civilization feels immense when viewed from the present, but from this distance it is only one brief expression in a much longer human becoming. The universe watched quietly as it always does, offering no judgment, only time. What we uncovered tonight does not close a mystery. It widens it. The past is not finished speaking and silence is not empty. Beneath layers of soil, beneath oceans, beneath memory itself, traces remain not waiting to be solved but to be noticed. Some truths don't demand answers. They ask only for presence, for the humility to sit with what cannot be fully known. There is comfort in recognizing how small we are, not as insignificance but as belonging. We are brief, fragile and luminous in our own way, shaped by gravity, time and the quiet persistence of consciousness. Entropy pulls everything apart, yet memory pulls us gently backward, reminding us that meaning does not vanish just because it is unfinished. As the lantern light dims and this chamber of thought grows dark again, remember that the universe does not stop when the story ends. Stars continue their slow burn. Earth continues its turning. Human questions continue their patient unfolding. Tonight's journey does not close the book. It simply presses the page flat and lets the dust settle. Rest now, traveller. It's all right to leave some wonders untouched. Stay curious, but rest gently. The past will still be there when you return, and the universe will keep watch as you drift quietly back into sleep beneath the same stars that have always been listening.